Persuading people to take the actions we want can be hard. Our teams and clients are bombarded with thousands of messages every single day. But there is a way for you to get above the noise. Stories. This is the Stories with Traction podcast, and I'm your host, Matt Zaun. Join my guests and me as we unpack the power of storytelling. We'll talk about topics like leadership, sales, and marketing, all through the lens of strategic storytelling. Enjoy this episode. I'm so excited because we will be talking about my favorite topic again this week, which is sales. I have Marcus Chan joining us again. He actually agreed to do a second part to this concept of how to go from being good at sales to being great. I very much appreciate his time. For those of you who did not listen to that episode, I highly recommend pausing this one and go listening to the very first one with Marcus Chan. Marcus Chan is the founder of Venli Consulting Group and Six Figure Sales Academy. And in addition, he just recently launched a book that I consider one of the best sales books I've ever read. I actually have a copy right here in my hand. It is Six Figure Sales Secrets. Thank you for joining us again, Marcus.
My absolute pleasure. Excited to be here again.
I really appreciate what we unpacked the last episode. I really do, because you really had a lot of different wisdom pieces, I felt, when it comes to just relationships in general, when it comes to the sales process. And it's just chock full with different nuggets and different pieces that we can all take away to be better at sales. But there were three in particular that I really appreciate you mentioning, which was the work ethic piece. We had talked about how good it is to be one that understands work ethic, and your background and my background really positioned us for that. But the problem is, if we're not self-aware, we could be beating our heads up against the wall. We could be really flustered and frustrated that we're not getting the results that we want. And that goes back to what you said about having massive self-awareness. You also talked about patterns, and I love that. You talked about being present enough to uncover patterns with different processes. And then you also talked about, if your prospect is saying it, it's true. And we were starting to touch on the elements of communication, and I want to start there with this episode. So I feel like we are coming up against a perfect storm right now. And what I mean by that is the last few years have not been kind to people's ability to communicate. I feel like across the board, doesn't matter what company I speak at, what state I'm speaking in, I feel like people's ability to connect and communicate has radically decreased. Now, there's many reasons for that. I would argue that speaking in person is different than speaking virtually. And a lot of people, they have not properly fine-tuned those communication skills. So there's that. And then there's also major changes in the market, which is really positioning people to need to sell more, but now their communication isn't where it needs to be. So there's just a tremendous amount of anger, frustration, anxiety. So I really want to pack the elements of communication. Do you believe that in-person and virtual and hybrid are different ways of connecting and communicating?
Well, 100%. But I also believe there are fundamental things that can bridge across all of them as well. Like the strategies end up staying the same. The tactics that you actually implement might be a little bit different. And I think it's really important to understand that, because when you think about it, to be able to communicate means you're able to transfer some sort of idea, concept, or message from one person to the other, whether that is in person, in a group presentation, if it's a face-to-face meeting 101, or if it's one-on-one via Zoom, or is it via email or whatever. You're just trying to communicate something to them. But how you do it is really what determines how effective you are at communicating. And we shared this before, where that awareness is really important, because what ends up happening is most people are just not aware of the shift that is required when you go from, say, even from face-to-face meetings to online only. So I'll give you a really simple example because, I was fortunate to have a field sales team. I was a field sales rep, but also all my teams were remote, so we did a lot of virtual stuff. So I before even the pandemic, before even that shift, I was already doing a hybrid model. Like that was already just part of life of what I was already doing. But the interesting thing is like I think about even an in-person sales call. I think about the moment I walk in to that business to go to the gatekeeper to say I have a meeting with Matt at 9 a.m. There's many things already happening. They're judging me very quickly from how I carry myself, how I walk in, to what I'm holding, to how I'm dressed, to how my shoes are clean or not, to how when they come out, how do I interact, how quick I am to respond. Even when you walk from the main central area to the conference room or to the office, you have even 30 seconds or even a minute or more of rapport building and engagement time to build some trust and bond, which is very, very important, very valuable. You also have them in their home court advantage, so they feel more comfortable usually and at ease. Now, if you compare that to virtual, you book that meeting, they may not even show up to begin with. So how you even communicate to be able to have them get them to show up on Zoom is now shifting. Once you're on the Zoom, same thing. Like a lot of people aren't used to thinking about, hey, how's my camera look? How's my light look? How am I dressed? What's my background? How do I carry it? You also don't get the few minutes of interaction and building trust and rapport with the receptionist or gatekeeper, or that hallway conversation, or even when the meeting ends, the walk back to the main area, which you get face to face. So you start realizing that. You start realizing, interesting. So how do I offset that? How do I improve my communication now on the Zoom? How can I be more impactful? It's almost as if you have less swings, if you will. So when you realize that it's less forgiving of a process, you start thinking, how can I improve my communication? How can I improve every touch point with them, whether it's email, whatever else? And the thing is, what I've seen in the past for many reps who maybe more field reps or entrepreneurs that are selling the field, meeting with prospects, if they had a good personality, they can kind of offset some of these other areas. Like if they weren't good at texting or email, it didn't really matter because they had a good enough personality, they can kind of offset it. Sure. But when it gets to a hybrid model, it's a little bit less forgiving. Or if it's all virtual. So when you realize that, that's how you start to focus on how can I improve how I communicate in every single strategy, every single tactic, every single medium, every single channel.
That is a really good point. So there's a lot to unpack here that I want people to recognize. So the first thing that you mentioned was that it starts before it actually starts, right? You come in, they're judging you by how you look, you dress. There's many different elements. That is unbelievably important for people to recognize. I do a ton of workshops and keynotes, and I always tell people my speech begins long before I step on that stage. I mean, people, they're looking at me depending on where I'm sitting, where I'm standing, as I'm being introduced. That is when it starts. It starts from the moment they see you. And I mean that sincerely. That's why it's so important to really warm up the room. And what I mean by that is everyone listening that does any kind of exercise, there's a way that you warm up your body before you're doing strenuous weight-bearing activities, or you could potentially injure yourself. The same is true when it comes to us speaking, whether it's a public speaking format or whether it is us in a conversation with a prospect. We have to warm up the room, and we have to be really good at doing that. There's ways that we could set people at ease. I love going and shaking as many hands as I possibly can in a room to try to figure out what's the pulse of the room, what are challenges that people are going through, trying to figure out even little things, like things that may or may not come up in my talk, trying to figure out, is there a particular sports team that this audience likes? Is there a particular book that this audience likes? What is it that's happening right now in their lives? And I try to incorporate that within my talk. That all goes back to warming up the room. Now, what's interesting, and I appreciate what you said about the difference between in-person and virtual, is we get less opportunity to do that when it comes to Zoom, because now people are just clicking and then, Zoom or Teams or whatever virtual platform they're using pops up and then boom, there the person is and you're talking. We still need to figure out a way to warm up that room, figuratively speaking. We still have to figure out a way to build that rapport. Now, I always recommend, if you're talking to a type A, full throttle, choleric, intensive personality, there's going to be less time to actually set them at ease because they're going to want to get to it right away. But there's ways to at least ease into that conversation. So I want to talk about that with you. So whether it is in person or virtual, what are some of the different things that you do? Maybe some questions, maybe some comments that you typically do, because you're a big framework person, Marcus.
Mm-hmm.
What are some of the things that people could take away just for simply warming something up and building that rapport?
Perfect, right? So, and I think what's important to understand is like at the end, people are buying from another human being. That's what it breaks down to, right?
Sure.
They have to not just trust, obviously, your company, the solution, but they have to trust you as a person you're talking to. So you have to be able to connect with them, not just beyond just a business level. And I think a mistake a lot of people make, especially if they're, not as familiar having a good process, is like they jump on a Zoom call and they're like, "How's it going? Going good. Okay, cool." And they kind of go right into it. And it's like, they're like, geez, like, and that person you're talking to, if they're on other Zoom calls, they may have attention residue from the last meeting still. So they're still kind of thinking about that. And there's no like bridge over, right? And you become almost like robotic. So let's just say for Zoom, because I think in person is easier because as you're walking up, how's your day going? You can kind of walk, you can just talk about whatever. It's like, oh, you can share a little personal. Hey, yeah, I just flew in this morning. It was really awesome. Like, how long you lived in Chicago? Oh, okay, that's very easy kind of stuff until you get to the boardroom, right, or to wherever you're meeting, right? On a Zoom, you don't really get that chance. So you can keep it super simple. And I think a very simple framework is you can simply ask them how their day has been going, or how their week has been going. And then they'll probably say, oh, how about you? I just share something personal about what you've been doing to humanize the situation. So if they say, oh, yeah, it's been a little crazy today. I've been like back to back to back, like just nonstop Zoom meetings. It's been crazy. How about you? They don't really care. They're just kind of saying that because they're trying to be nice, right? So instead you say, oh, yeah, cool, me too. All right, anyways, well, share something personal. Make it human. Make it real. Like, oh, make a joke, right? If you can. If you're not funny, don't make jokes, right? Like if you're kind of funny, I think I'm funny than I really am. So I'm like, oh, cool. I totally get it. I know it's like back to back to back. You can't even go to the bathroom, right? Ha ha ha. Whatever. Anyways, it's been a great day so far. I actually just got back. I took a break. I just walked my dog. It's been amazing out here. Just being outside, take a little break from being stuck behind a computer all day. Now it's very intentional because I share a story like that. I'm sharing the story in the mind of the prospect that they're probably already dealing with, which is, man, I'm stuck indoors all day. It'd be nice to get some fresh air. So I'm going to share it's kind of a human element story into something like that. It's really powerful. Now you don't necessarily have something like that, right? Or it might be like, for example, if it's like if it's like a morning call, like I'll say, yeah, actually, it's been a great morning so far. I just dropped my kiddo off at school. It's been awesome being able to walk to school because the weather's not too bad yet. Oh, awesome. And if they have kids, they're like, oh yeah, they love that, right? So now there's like this very human connection. And then from there, that's probably the first piece, is have just a little bit. I would not spend like 15 minutes on that, because if you only have 15 minutes on the call or 30 minutes on the call, you don't want to waste that. So just a little bit, right? Super simple. It's like something a little personal. And how's your day been going? How's your week been going? How's your week wrapping up? Share something personal yourself. Nothing crazy. Don't go to some long tangent. Something short, very simple. And then you kind of bridge into the next step, which is, I call it an interest creating statement, which is also a reminder of why you're having this conversation. And then an agenda. All right. Now, sometimes it depends on how long ago they booked the meeting. They may not remember. So you might need to bring that back. And an interest creating statement is being able to reestablish why you're even there to begin with. Right. So, for example, it might sound simple like, well, awesome, Matt. So I know you're limited time, so I'm excited to chat with you. And I'm not sure you remember or not, but last week when we spoke on the phone, I mentioned I'm already working with a number of other organizations, such as company A, B, and C, helping them with different storytelling workshops to help their sales teams double the size of the revenue for the year. All right, boom. That's like very simple. It's like, oh, clear benefit, some social proof. That's like 15 seconds. That was not long.
Sure.
And then I'm going to the agenda for how the call goes. right? And you can just make it simple and casual. So hey, so why don't you do it? Just do a deep dive into your situation, Matt. Just to make sure we have a good understanding of your business, and then based off that, I'd like a few recommendations how we potentially partner up if it makes sense. And we can plan next steps from there. Does that sound good? That sounds good. Easy peasy. Really simple.
I love that framework. So I just want to make sure that I heard you right. Did you say interest related statement?
Interest creating statement.
Interest creating statement.
Mm-hmm.
Perfect. Okay. Interest creating statement. I love that. So there's so many different things that you're sharing with us that are really important, Marcus. So I want to talk about that. So you talked about sharing a story that relates to your prospect, just setting them at ease, which is so incredibly important. But you also talked about humor. And I want to validate what you said. Humor can be dangerous. I never recommend people try to tell a certain joke, especially if they don't know the person. Everyone's humor is different. Right. You don't want to offend someone, especially if your joke falls flat. That is not a good way to start a meeting. So there is danger. There is a high risk. There could potentially be a high reward too, but I think there could be more of a higher risk when it comes to humor. That's when when I'm always doing coaching with politicians, I always say, stay away from humor. You're not a comedian, right? It could very much backfire on you. So you want to figure out a way to make them smile versus making them laugh. Sometimes the smiling can lead to laughter. I had a mentor many, many years ago where he would always ask me, Matt, how are you doing? And I would say, I'm doing good. And he'd say, well, notify your face, meaning smile, right? Smile a little bit, Matt. If you're doing good, smile. So it's really getting them to the place of smiling. So not necessarily making them laugh like hyenas, but getting them to the place of smiling. And I really appreciate what you said about people are on meetings constantly. So how do you actually pull them out of that state on just another meeting? Now, I'm not advocating that people say something crazy, but say something different enough to almost have a hook, like an attention-grabbing type statement. So, for instance, based on what my business mentor mentioned to me a while back about notifying my face, I wanted you to be smiling when we first started talking, Marcus. And I was recently speaking out in the Portland area. Marcus is from Portland. So I started to talk about different restaurants that are actually in Portland, because my thought is more than likely, regardless of how many virtual meetings you have today, someone's not going to mention those specific restaurants, which will be a little bit different, right? And it wasn't me trying to be extremely funny. It was just me trying to get us both smiling, to really build that connection that I love the Portland area. There was some incredible food there. So it's really building that connection. So we build the connection, and then we're sharing different stories, which I appreciate you mentioning too. And then I really like that interest creative statement and really going into it on, all right, setting the tone for the meeting. I do not think enough people do that. And a lot of times people are booking meetings, far in advance. So they may completely forgot the agenda, the structure, how it's going to flow. So I really appreciate you mentioning that. Is there anything else that you would add to the structure of those sales calls?
Yeah. So I think I want to elaborate a few points too, right? So like if you don't, the interest creating statement, I always think like when you get on a sales call for someone the first time, you have to earn the right to be there, right? They're choosing to give you time. So when you are showing through social proof that you already work with multiple organizations, this is establishing credibility very quickly. Okay, this is actually worth my time. This person seems to know what they're talking about. And there's a very clear benefit of what I probably want. So that's really, really important to how you structure that, because they might be, this isn't a nice person. Now that transition is like, yep, I should be here. I'll give this guy at least 15 minutes, which is important. The next point I want to bring up as well is if it's virtual, like how do you show up, right? How do you look, right? If it's face to face, it's even the same thing. Like let's just say if you're sitting in the lobby and they come out, but like how like when they come out, are you smooth and fluid to get up and shaking their hand, or are you fumbling, dropping yourself all over the place? And I used to literally back as a field rep, I literally engineered out exactly where everything was going to go, from in my suit pockets to which hand was holding what, for everything. And the reason that was really important was I knew when they came out, what I did not want to do was a fumble, drop, which caused me to lose confidence. I want to be able to step right up, hand ready to go, shake hands, eyes open, mouth wide, bright, smiling, ready to rock. And I want to infuse them with this is a good decision to talk to this person, that I am someone of equal status. That's very important. And you take that same concept and you apply to Zoom. So once you're on a Zoom, it's the same thing. We talk about some of the nonverbal communication about even how things look, but how are you sitting up? How are you looking? Are you looking right in the camera? Are you showing confidence and conviction that you should be there and you are of value to them? Because you can do the same framework we just mentioned of having some personal rapport, and then you go into the integrated statement and the agenda, which we'll probably cover next. But if you don't have the right tonality, don't write the right confidence, conviction, then they'll see right through it. They'll be like, this is going to be a waste of my time. So you can do all those things, but it's kind of like having a knife that's completely blunt. It may or may not get the job done. If they're really nice, you can probably chop some vegetables, kind of, right? Or you just make sure that knife is super sharp. Once that Zoom is on, so you're ready to flow, and you establish increased credibility and confidence with them once you guys start having a conversation.
I really appreciate you mentioning the confidence piece and playing out the scenario in your mind. And it's interesting to hear you think about, all right, here's how I'm going to have my coffee. Here's how, whether it's a briefcase or a backpack or whatever you're carrying, here's how that's going to look. They're coming in the lobby. You don't want to be fumbling. You don't want things to be falling. You're going to lose that confidence. I love that. But also the importance of being likable. I appreciate you mentioning that as well. That is so unbelievably important. Likability is huge. Absolutely huge. And for those of you that follow my work, you know that I was in the political arena for quite some time, worked with many, many politicians. And what's interesting is do not underestimate the power of likability. There are tons of politicians. I mean, name a party on numerous parties, different sides of the aisle, regardless of different policy initiatives. And they may not be the best politician. They may not be the best candidate. But man, if they're likable, they absolutely have a chance to win. Never underestimate that.
Can I share a story about this? I
Absolutely.
think you'll appreciate this. So I remember this is years ago, and I was a sales manager running sales or a small sales org about 20 sales reps. Had a lot of success. And in our region, we had about like 30 or so other sales managers doing what I was doing, most of my smaller teams. And I had like a group of crew that I was really close with, and the other ones I kind of knew, and they didn't really know me that well. Now, what was really interesting was when I was interviewing for a director role, I knew I was going to become the director over 9 or 10 of these managers. And out of the 9 or 10, I knew a couple of them in the region or the market I was going to go after really liked me because they knew me inside. They knew like I was like they knew what I was all about. But for other people, like they saw me from the outside in. They're like, this guy is machine-like. He's robotic. He's probably a micromanager. He's super intense. There's no way he could get these results without being a micromanager. Like there's something there's something off with him. He's too intense. I was not likable to some of the other people.
Wow.
All right. Because I frankly hadn't taken the energy to build a relationship with them as people I became friends with. There are other top performers, so we kind of just we got along. I'm like, they're just like whatever. Anyways, so when I got promoted to be a director, I knew this to be the case, right? I'm like okay, like I knew they perceived me a certain way, but the truth is they didn't know me. They didn't. They knew nothing about me. They did not work for me. Like they could talk to any one of my reps that worked directly for me, and they're like, "This guy's the best leader I've ever had." But they weren't going to do that. So they're going to judge me based off only the awards I've won and basically what they saw me do in the presentations I've given so far. This guy's a freaking machine. He'll probably micromanage me, right? They just didn't think they're like he's too systematic for all of us. 2 out of 9 liked me. The other 7 did not. So because I knew that, I'm like, my number one goal in the first 30 days is to gain their trust and establish that they like me. It's the same principle we're talking about here, right? Because we understand that, and people have a perception of how things are going to go. So the way I had set it up was, I'm like, well, number one, that means if the manager probably doesn't like me or trust me yet, that means the team won't trust me or like me yet, which makes it very hard for me to do my job. So I'm like, okay, so what I'm going to do is I'm going to go on this like tour, if you will, for the first 90 days, where I'm going to fly out to all the ones where I think they don't like me the most. I'm in that order, okay? And I'm going to go visit their teams, one team a week. And I was like, the best thing I do, I can leverage them and not just try to sell myself, but I'm gonna get them to sell me.
Wow.
So what I did was, well, I flew in town. So most time it's like, when a director comes in town, it's a dog and pony show, right? That's how these operations think. So instead, I'll have a sales rep pick me up, and I go in the field for them for half a day, and we just sell business. We sell a bunch of business, and then they're like, "Oh my God, he's actually a real dude." In the car, we're just telling stories. I'm engaging. I'm helping them win, and they're like, "Oh, because I know." Then they're going to tell their buddies on the team. Okay, and then that night.
So there's strategy in this, right? Because
100% strategy. I identified what was going to be the weak points, and I wanted to do what I could control that.
Sure.
Right. So that was really important. So it goes even deeper. So even that night, the first night, I'll have a team dinner. Right. We wouldn't talk about work at all. We go around. We kind of BS, and I would do these different exercises to break the ice, and I'll do something like I'll do like let's go around the table for dinner. It's like, let's just share either a hero, a highlight, or a hardship in your life. Just share one story. I'll start first. And I almost always chose a hardship and how I overcame it, to show humility, to show growth, to show behaviors and values that I care about. And I knew the people that would rise to the top would care about those things. So I started breaking them down, right? And then, of course, the next day, like I would do a training in front of all of them, and I would role play live with them. They're like, "Oh my God, this guy actually knows what he's talking about." Again, I'm breaking all the limiting beliefs about this, gaining so they actually like me. And then when I had one-on-ones with each of the reps, most of them were like, "Oh, this guy's gonna sit here and go through all my numbers and beat me up." No, I sat them down and just got to know them. I uncovered what their fears were, their hopes, their dreams and desires. And I mapped out how I was going to help them get there. So I do all these things. And part of I need them to like me and trust me, right? So I share this with you because you could take these same type of concepts we're talking about here, and you can apply to anything. When you need to actually influence and sell, but that's what sell is, just influencing, you realize the faster I get someone to trust and like me, the more likely we can actually work together to help us work together to have a win-win situation.
So there's so much to talk about here that I don't want leaders to miss out on. So for those of you listening that you are a VP of sales, you are C-suite, and you are so focused on facts and figures and numbers and metrics, which is all good. And Marcus talked about in the last episode, we touched on it today, the importance of studying patterns, understanding numbers. That's all awesome. But I really appreciate what you said, Marcus, regarding hero, highlight, and hardship, because now they're going to be sharing stories that are going to connect to you as the leader. This is so powerful about gaining trust. It's so powerful. And the numbers will come. Like if you have a team of people that are willing to literally bend over backwards for you, they want to scale that mountain to help you achieve your goals, more than likely you've built a tremendous amount of trust with them. And that really comes back to the storytelling piece. I challenge everyone listening to this episode to do that with your team. Go around the table and ask hero, highlight, hardship. Try to figure out more about them. It's going to connect you to them more. They're going to feel more endeared to you, and it will build trust. So thank you so much for sharing that. I very much appreciate it.
That's right. You got to win the hearts and minds of your people. If you can win the hearts and minds of your people, then suddenly not only will they do what's expected of them, you'll see a percentage of them will start applying discretionary effort. That's effort beyond the scope of the job, beyond the scope of the job description, and that allows them to take to the next level. Now you have people raging and say, "Hey, can I help you, Matt? Can I help you do this? What about this initiative? Can I help you take over?" And now before you know it, you have leaders, and you're multiplying yourself. So that's how I was able to scale my team from 85 reps to 110 plus employees, right? And over multiple states, right? Because I focused on winning the hearts and minds of our people. I manage processes, but I led the people. And there's a big difference between the two.
I like that. One of the questions that I love asking, because I think it's unique enough, but not as crazy. Like I want it to be crazy because I like, being a little bit crazy, but it's not it's not overly crazy, but it gets people to think, is once I've had a rapport with someone, I would not do this with a prospect, but with someone that I've had an established relationship with, I love asking them, are you excited about your life right now?
Mm.
Are you excited about your life right
Yes.
now? Because people aren't asked that. It's a little bit different. It makes them think. And it's amazing some of the responses that I get, because it's not a yes or no, like, hey, are you doing good? Yes. Or I'm doing good. It's very superficial. But are you excited about your life right now? And more than likely, something will come up that they would have never shared with anyone else in their day. And then it really directs the start of that conversation. I love doing that. I love doing
Mm.
that.
I got a modify. You might like this one. You might even add to this to repertoire, right? So, one of the things I did, and this is like, again, you have to have some trust and rapport with them, otherwise it's not going to really be effective. So every 6 months, I did what's called an individual development plan, which I sat down with every single rep. So I had 100,000, 10 employees. I sat every single one for 30 minutes, and we dug into, you know, business aside, life in their life, where do they want to go, and where are they right now, how we get there, right? We build a plan to work towards that. But before we dove into it, I started with one question. It was really simple because they sit down. They're always like, they're always nervous. They're always just nervous because it's just like someone's in town, whatever. So I'll be like, I'll look them in the eye in this type of tone. I'll be like, so Matt, are you happy? That's it. Just wait. Same concept, the exact same concept. And it's amazing because you'll see someone kind of, oh yeah, yeah. You sure? And you start unpacking just so much stuff. And it can be whether it's work, personal, maybe they're going through a divorce. Maybe I have people come out, they have addictions and stuff. So we could now work towards actually helping them and providing them resources, right? But the reality is most people never pause to think, am I happy? And what exactly is holding back from happiness? And usually it's something internal. They don't realize it quite yet. They think it's external, but it's usually internal, right? But it's like, what internally do I need to focus on now to actually be happy? Because when I'm happy in my own life, I'm going to be a better husband, human being, brother, father, sister, mother, parent, teacher, whatever.
So here's what's amazing about that. It doesn't matter where I am, where I'm speaking. It's the same objection that continues to come up, is companies trying to figure out how to win the talent war. I hear it all the time. How do we retain top talent? How do we win the talent war? It doesn't matter what state I'm speaking in. This comes up all the time. And what's amazing, Marcus, is something as simple as a manager or a director asking someone that they're responsible for leading, are you happy? It's amazing the response that they're going to get. More than likely, the person is probably going to pause a little bit longer than most questions to really figure out, wow, am I really being asked this question? They're going to feel more endeared. They're going to feel almost bewildered that someone cares enough to ask that type of question to them. But they may open up and build an even more connection, which will lead back to gaining trust, what you talked about earlier. But it's going to start the process of building more connection to figure out there might be something happening under the surface that is really positioning them to lose, where you could position them to actually win that month. But it might not be that they don't necessarily want to do the work to get the sales that you need them to get. It could be something is happening that is really challenging in their life that you as a leader can really help them through. So I love that question. Are you happy? It's an amazing question.
What's interesting is like, so one of my favorite books is probably Stephen Covey's 7 Habits of Highly Effective People, right? And one of the principles in there is seek to understand. And I think it's something that's so simple that we often just forget. And, it's like when we work with employees, they're human beings, just like you and me. We wake up, we have problems, we have issues, our kids get sick, we feel tired, we feel fatigued, we want to throw up. Things just happen. No one's perfect. And when you start treating people like an actual human being and you start seeking to understand, you start realizing like, being a good leader is actually not that hard. It's just hard to be consistent with it. It's having that awareness of what you're doing and how can you start being more consistent with it? Because what ends up happening is, because I'm very systematic how I think. I always think like, oh, interesting. Well, I did one strategy. This really seemed to help. with understanding people better. I'm like, interesting. Like the tool I use is the individual development plan. I just do it consistently. I can really understand, but how I deliver is the most important thing. Because now once I do it consistently, I can really assess them out. And then what's interesting is I start adding other things as well to really seek to understand, which was I would call my reps out of the blue every single quarter for 10 minutes. I just call them out of the blue. So I would see them face to face. I call them out of the blue for 10, just check in. No agenda. Hey, how's it going? Good. What's up? Nothing. Just want to see how are you?
And that was probably the response too, right?
Yeah, they're like, I'm just out here grinding. They're trying to tell me what I want to hear. I'm like, well, hey, so I do have one question for you. It's really important. What are you struggling with the most I can help you with right now? Oh, I'm not sure. What's driving me crazy? What's pissing you off right now? And I'll just for 10 minutes, they're like, something like, no, I'm just glad you asked me. I'm actually totally good. Thank you. Okay, cool. Well, you have my cell number. Call me if you need anything. Okay, cool. Boom. But the thing is, most leaders aren't willing to do that. Most leaders much rather be an armchair quarterback and sit and reactive. When you start realizing these patterns and you are more aware about who you are, you can start implementing systems in place to start doing that. And this applies to everything, sales, influence, everything. And when you start doing that, you become better and better and better over time. And you start having a tight feedback loop. It doesn't mean it's perfect every time, but if you're a sales leader and if you have 50% turnover and you can reduce it down to say 30%, 20%, you just reduce a lot of stress for you. This is how I took a region that was running 40% plus turnover, took it to 17% my first year.
Wow.
Because I started uncovering these things and I started realizing what are systems I can put in place to improve them, right? And as I uncovered feedback, I want people to quit and leave. I'm like, what can I do to fix this? So for example, one of the things they then mentioned, hey, Marcus, like, I want to leave because I'm not getting developed to be the next role. So they weren't growing anymore. So here they are 2-3 years in, like, I'm not growing. Like, I guess I'll just wait until I get promoted. And they hated that. They couldn't see the future. They couldn't see beyond the day to day or on the week to week. So, and they're like, well, we have this like program called, Captain's Club, but it's pretty garbage. I'm like, interesting. I'm taking over. I took over that program, completely redid it. I gathered feedback from all the existing people that quit that program. I'm like, what do you hate? What do you love? What do you want to see? And I built a completely comprehensive whole new program to start developing people early on. So now people were excited about that. And I started marketing it heavily, how much more effective it was, and started building and making it better over time. And all I did was listen to the people and actually just care. And the one of the best strategies for success is just caring. You want to be great at sales? Care about your prospect. Want to have better sales teams? Care about your people, right? When you start thinking this way, you actually just care. It's amazing how much innovation can come out because you start asking better questions.
I love that. And I think a lot of that goes back to being intentional as a leader. You had to be intentional to make those 10-minute calls. But think about how important of an investment those 10-minute calls were. And what's amazing is, like, it doesn't need to be extremely it doesn't need to suck the time out of us. Like 10 minutes for all these different people you're calling, it's not like you're spending hours and hours and hours with them. And I want people to recognize them, recognize that. One of the things that my mother, who was an extremely strategic person, she was actually one of the most strategic individuals I've ever met. She taught me the importance of writing thank you cards, about writing handwritten notes. Now, what's amazing about this is it takes moments to do. And depending on the prospect or the client that I'm working with, like, I have different templates in my computer. I just kind of tweak the different verbiage to make it more applicable to them. It takes me 30 seconds to do. That 30 seconds is incredible. I mean, do you know how few people get handwritten thank you cards in the mail now? I mean, it's about being intentional. So I love that you mentioned those 10-minute calls, because it's not a ton of time, but it is an incredible investment. So thank you so much for sharing that. I appreciate it.
So I want to add to this piece, because this is like so underutilized, right? So I think about it's the same thing, right? So I love the thank you notes. I love all that. And one of the things I think is super powerful. This is what a lot of people don't realize, right? This is like, if you think about like anyone that's ever quit a job, if they're married, they go home, they complain their spouse. That's the first thing they do, right? Oh, it was awful. My boss is all on my case. Oh my God, bad process, bad whatever, bad pressure from the board, pressure from whatever. They complain. All right. And what happens is the spouse just says, okay, yeah, it's terrible. Eventually, when the person wants to quit, they're like, I want to quit. Like, you should quit because you've been talking about it, right? I knew that. So the most important things I did early on as a sales leader was simply this. So what I did was I had all their home addresses for all my reps, right? And this as a director as well. I had the names of all the spouses. I would write a note to the spouse every single quarter from me. I put their name on it. And in that note, I would address and recognize all the behaviors that I saw and wanted them to be aware of. It'd be like, like Susie, Marcus did an incredible job this quarter. Like he helped me so much with the coaching these 2 new reps. Like he went above and beyond. And I just want to say thank you so much for your support of him, because I know sometimes he calls late at night, and I know he could have been with the family and kids. So it means a lot to me. But I just want to say thank you for your support. Anything else, if you need anything from me, here's my cell number. Here's my email. Call me anytime.
Wow.
And I wrote every single quarter without fail to their spouses, right? So now what happens is spouses like, that's interesting. Here's this like handwritten notes, or at least for the envelope. My handwriting is terrible. So the inside, I had to type it out because my handwriting is terrible. But inside, but they're like, interesting, handwritten, to the spouse's name. They get that. They're like, whoa, this guy is like, this is your boss? And they had never met me. It's interesting, right? And what's really funny is I'll get these random texts from spouses like, thank you so much for that note. Or if they didn't say anything, when I would have like an awards dinner, they'd come up to me like, oh, I'm so glad I found out. Like, thank you so much. I know you were like last week. I literally had spouses tell me, they're like, so, Kurt never talks about what happens at work at all to us. So every time we get those letters from you, I gather a family, we read together to celebrate Dad. I'm like, wow, that's amazing, right? So this is how you start winning the hearts and minds of your people. But more importantly, you're just serving them and you're just caring. And you're just taking that intentionality. But the issue most people, they focus on is the number. When you focus on the number by itself, yes, you can make some incremental changes. But when you focus on the people, and then you build systems around to make these things happen like I just discussed, now you start winning the hearts and minds of the people. And you can replicate it over and over and over. And then over time, you start adding more things to make it better and better. And when you do that consistently, you start having a machine, a factory of superstars. And that keeps producing regardless, because you have a system that's replicatable.
That is incredible. And my guess is the individuals that receive those letters, that is the first and unfortunately probably the last time that happened. So I want people to recognize this. For everyone listening that's complaining about bringing in top talent or keeping top talent in your company, right? They're complaining about there's a revolving door and they're going to other companies. Like, that is a lot of what's happening right now. I want you to recognize this. Think about someone going to their significant other and saying, I want to quit. And that person saying, oh, good, I think you should, versus simply saying, why? What's going on? Why? Because more than likely, the individual that received numerous handwritten notes or the info from you, they're probably going to think, why? What's going on? Because they like you, because it's the first time that they received that. So I very much appreciate you. That is an incredible value add for sure. One of the things I do want to dive into, Marcus, because I did promise you that we'd get to it. So I legitimately believe this is one of the best sales books I've ever read, The 6-Figure Sales Secrets. I appreciate you putting this into the world. I remember when you mentioned that you were going to start writing this, and I was extremely excited to get my hands on this, just knowing all the different things that I've learned from you over the last couple of years. And there's one thing in the book that you talked about there's many things that you talked about that I was fascinated by, but one of the things that I think was very helpful to me was your whole mindset when it comes to voicemails. So sales reps hate leaving voicemails. And more than likely, it's because, in the book you mentioned that you literally got a 1% callback rate if you were lucky. That's the reason why sales reps hate leaving voicemails. They hate the failure rate with it.
Right.
So can you talk about what you did regarding voice? Now, again, I want people to recognize this because this is studying patterns. You studied a pattern to figure out, hey, if I send a letter to someone's spouse, more than likely they're going to have my back when that person wants to quit. That's understanding what's happening. That's being intentional, understanding patterns. You recognized, hey, I'm getting a 1% callback rate. Hey, someone left me a voicemail. You actually have a story in the book where you talked about one day you received the voicemail and you called the guy back right away, thinking to yourself, wait a second, why did I call him back? This is a sales call. How did that happen? It's being intentional, studying patterns. So can you talk about the best way for people to get their voicemails called back?
Yeah. So it's let me explain like the understand why this is so critical, right? So everything we talked about so far ties into having a very clear feedback loop. Do something, something happens, good or bad. Analyze the feedback, iterate, try again. And you rinse and repeat till you get a desired result. And the mistake many people make is they don't pay attention to the feedback loop. So, for example, early on, young salesperson, every weekend to try to drown away my pain and sorrows, binge drink every single weekend. Friday and Saturday, go out crazy, blackout drunk, feel terrible, lingering effects for multiple days, eat terrible food, feel bad about myself, and then go to Monday, try to be a good salesperson. Rinse and repeat for years. Feedback loop. Oh, hey, wait a minute. When I drink a lot of alcohol and binge drink, I make bad decisions. I eat way more than I should. I eat greasy food. I feel awful for days. I'm not clear in the mind. Solution, stop drinking. Right? So now, stop drinking. What happens? Oh, clarity. Feel better. More energy. More focus. Time on weekends now to do what? Do things I actually care about. Spend time with people I actually love versus the people I don't care about at a bar. So when you start thinking about the feedback loop in every part of your life, you start getting better across time. And this applies to voicemails as well. And the thing is, what I also realized too with voicemails was, I'm like, interesting. Like, if you, like, a good connect rate is 10%, meaning if you make, say, 10 phone calls, probably one's going to answer the decision maker. That's not bad. So if you make 100, that's 10. And assuming the other 90 are qualified prospects, that's 90 people that did not answer, which means they're not, those are opportunities. It doesn't mean they're a bad prospect. It just means they haven't answered. So I can either leave a voicemail or I could do nothing. And early on, the mistake I made was I had a bad voicemail. So I'll leave a voicemail, no one called back. Maybe at best I get 1%. So naturally, most people are like, that's why it doesn't work, right? So in the book, I share the story about how I got someone to call me back. And when they call me back, I'm like, how did they get me a call back? Well, I'm like, number one, they didn't sound like a salesperson. Interesting. Number two, it's very short and brief and concise. And number three, maybe curious. I'm like, that's interesting. Like, will this work for me? I don't know. Right. But I know the feedback loop was this guy left me a voicemail. I called him back. Right. That's a desired outcome I personally want. How can I get the same desired outcome? Success leaves clues.
Sure.
So I started to test, and write out new scripting and testing it out, changing from what I said to how I said it. And it got to the point when the one I came up with and started refining over time, it eventually got to about a 70% callback rate, meaning I would leave 10 voicemails and I would get like 6 to 7 call me back. And as I got better on actually how to be on the phones, I started booking like 90% of those.
Wow.
So now I realize I'm like, shoot, I don't need to make more calls. I just need to be better at voicemails. I already know I'm going to leave voicemails. I just need a better voicemail, right? And like, just because the tool you have is not getting the results you want doesn't mean it's a bad tool. Are you using it right? If I try to hammer a nail with the back end of a hammer or the claw, maybe I'll get some results, or I can change my grip, change how I hold, and get a better desired result. That's how I started thinking. That's when I came up with the voicemail, and I'll share it right now because it's very, very simple, right? It's literally this. It's like, hey, Matt, it's Marcus. I'm calling in reference to ABC Company. Please give me a call back to my cell, 541-123-4567. Again, 541-123-4567. Thanks. Click. That's it. Very, very simple, right? And an ABC Company is just a current customer that you already work with. That's it, right? Ideally, a similar size. And because of my tonality, it's firm. It's authoritative. It's not salesy. When people get that voicemail, they're like, interesting. That is maybe a 10-second voicemail, transcribes easily on the phone. They can see it very quickly. If they have software on the computer, transcribe on an email, they can see it. Like, interesting. What's this all about? Don't know. Oh. And people have FOMO. That's a human nature. That's a human behavior we have. We fear missing out. So what's this all about? I'm curious now. And curiosity is one of the greatest drivers of action. So when you understand that, you start realizing, interesting. When people get curious, they want to have it. Just like kids around Christmas. If they don't know what's in the present, they're super pumped. They're excited. They can't wait. They're trying to look inside because they're so curious. And then once they have it, they play it for one day and it's not interesting anymore. Right? But if you can leverage the same concept of FOMO and curiosity into a voicemail just like this, and you start doing it consistently, you'll start getting calls back. Now, the mistake a lot of people make is they say, Marcus, I did it one time, didn't work. Oh, of course. How many times have you done a workout one time, got a six-pack? Never happened, right? So you start focusing on doing consistently. You do 100 times, verbatim, same way, same tonality, and you'll start seeing results. And then you'll have the issue number 2, which is, how do I answer when they call me?
That's
How
awesome.
book a meeting, right? So you solve one problem, you get another problem, right? This happened yesterday. So I got on our coaching call with my students. They're like, I'm getting like 5 to 10 callbacks a day now. It's incredible. It's never happened before. But like, I'm only booking like 1 out of 5 or 10. So I'm like, let me see what you're saying. Made some tiny tweaks, and that's all we got to do, right?
Wow. I see. I love the whole idea of looking at different patterns, especially in human behavior. You mentioned the transcript. I want people to recognize that, because when I get a voicemail and I see the transcript and it's like 2 paragraphs long, the first thing in my mind is, oh my gosh, what in the world is this about? That's my reaction. When I see the short one, I think, wow, that person was really thoughtful, that they didn't blow up my phone with all, it's really, really important. I appreciate that element of the feedback loop. So I'm looking at your book right now, all the different scripts that you have. I highly, highly recommend people check this out. It is gorged with different scripts, different techniques, different tricks, different secrets. It's absolutely incredible. Highly, highly recommend it. And Marcus, thank you again for everything that you mentioned today. I got 3 big takeaways from our conversation that I want to highlight. I know a lot of people listening got other different aspects out of it, but the top 3 takeaways for me personally are going to be talking about sharing a story in the beginning, really focusing on sharing a personal story that relates to the prospect. We were talking about virtual calls, the importance of setting them at ease. What kind of story can you share to really make that connection? I also really like you mentioning playing out the scenario in your mind and being very specific about it. When this person walks out, I'm going to have my coffee in my left hand so that I could shake their hand right away. I'm going to have my briefcase here, so when they come out, I'm not rummaging through papers and they fall on the floor. It's gonna really bring down confidence. I appreciate you mentioning that, playing out the scenario in your mind. But the third piece that I loved was us as leaders being intentional, asking questions to really gain trust. You had mentioned having people talk about a hero, a highlight, or a hardship. I love it. For everyone out there listening that's a leader that leads sales teams, imagine what can happen by just asking a question like that. Asking a question like Marcus mentioned, are you happy? There's so many things that are going to come out that you didn't even realize to make that connection. So Marcus, I very much appreciate your time. Thank you again. If anyone wants to get more information on what you do, they want to connect with you, what are the best places that they could go to do that?
Awesome. First off, thank you so much for having me on. An absolute pleasure. So you can find me on LinkedIn. Look up Marcus Chan. It's super simple. You can head to venliconsulting.com for more information about, what we do. And of course, I'll grab a free copy of my Wall Street Journal best-selling sales book. Head to closethechan.com.
Perfect. I will include that in the show notes. Highly, highly recommend checking Marcus out. I've been following him for quite some time on LinkedIn. He shares so many incredible insights that I can immediately implement in my business. And again, absolutely love the book. It's one of the best sales books I've ever read. So thank you for putting it into the world. And thank you again, Marcus, for your time today.
Thanks so much.
Thank you for listening to the Stories with Traction podcast. Please leave a review, since positive reviews will make it easier for others to find this conversation. Next episode will launch on Friday at 8 a.m. Eastern. Until then, remember, If you want to persuade with power and inspire those around you to action, you must share more stories.